Hello, and welcome to another virtual author chat at the Poison Pen. I'm John Charles, and I'm delighted to have with us as our very distinguished author guest today, Meg Tilly. Before we begin, I do want to mention that if this is your first time listening in, we do have copies of Meg's books, including her new book, The Runaway Heiress, available for you to either pick up at the store, or we'll be glad to send it out to you via the mail. Feel free to give us a call, come on in, or go online, and we'll get a copy out to you. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Golden Globe Award-winning, Oscar-nominated actress, writer, and generally nice person, Meg Tilly. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on. And also, the Poison Pen has books from like a wide variety of authors, and they're signed, and they have great events as well. So if you're new, if it's any of my tea timers, then please, make sure you check them out, because they've got all these author events, and they get all the books signed. It's been really awesome.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Meg. Now, I know it's hard to believe that there may be some people listening in who are not familiar with you in your life. So Can you tell us a little bit about who you were before you became a writer?
Who I was, it's more like who I was before I became me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like who I was before I became a writer. The basics of it are, I grew up really scrappy. We had challenging childhood, and then I went. I became a ballet dancer. My grandmother paid for ballet classes, and so I was able to go. And then I worked jobs since I was 14. To pay for my ballet clothes, because she paid for the classes, but I paid for my tights and my leotard and my shoes, which were expensive because they'd wear out. And then from that, I was a dancer. I danced in the movie Fame. I was in New York on full scholarship with great teachers like Milton Hayden and Madame Darvash. And then I got dropped. I fractured my back. I became an actress. And then from the acting, even though I was acting, when I hit like 29, 30, I started writing on the sly, not because I thought I was a writer, but because I needed to. And that's how my first book came. And I was going to do it under pseudonym, but then they wanted me to go on book tour. Two publishers who were interested in it when I was Anna Fury. And then I found, so I had to say, well, because that was when I was super famous. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if Anna Fury showed up and it was Meg Tilly, and people say, that must not be fiction then. Why is she using a pseudonym? So then I sold it as Meg Tilly, and I went on book tour saying it was fiction. So that's how I came. And then I kind of made my way. So I just kept writing, but I had to find my way to romantic suspense. I read romantic suspense, like copious amounts of romantic suspense, gobbled it up. I found it, actually, I first discovered it with Jane Ann Krentz, whose new book is out right now.
Oh, yes.
Past. And this is her Jane Ann Krentz book over here.
Oh.
Yeah, and she's got a new book coming out in November. Because you guys will have them signed. Put your order in for it. Her new book is under Jane Castle, and it's called Guild Boss. So that's coming out in November. So anyway, she's the one who started me. I picked up one of her books at the airport, and I used to always read just literary stuff, like just in the classics, and I read that, and it just lifted my heart. I think it was Mistress, and it lifted my heart, and I was like, this is fun. And I had small children, and it made the world seem like, okay, bad guys are out there, but it's gonna be okay. And I just fell in love with her, and I've read everything she's written since. So that was kind of like, but I always thought, like, I wrote literary books, I wrote YA books, I wrote middle grade books, but the romantic suspense was like the golden chalice, like, oh, but I could never write that. And then I did. That's how I came here. So it's been a growth to trust myself. Like the first one I did it under pseudonym. It was a growth to trust myself, to kind of be like, okay, this is my fourth one. And I'm like, okay, I think you got this, I think you're kind of, all those years, 3 decades of reading it, it just kind of permeated somehow into my body.
Now, your first romantic suspense book was Solace Island, is that?
Yes, Solace Island, right there. And that I did it first as Sarah Flynn, and then Jane Ann Krentz, she blurbed it. So first I was like, oh, she knows I'm alive. You know how it is when you meet your, and then I got to meet her, and you're reluctant to meet your heroes because many times you can be very disappointed, at least in the acting world or the directing world. She's no disappointment. Like, she's just a beautiful woman, you know, inside and out. And she's like her heroines, and she's just been very generous to me. So that was my first. And then I wrote Cliff's Edge, and then I wrote Hidden Cove, and my new one's The Runaway Heiress.
Tell us a little bit about the new book for readers who might not know about it.
Okay, so it's a standalone book, but it came out of a small character in Hidden Cove, which was the third one there. So she was just somebody who was somebody's assistant, and at Zelia's assistant at the art gallery. And my readers just kept saying, what happened to Mary? What happened to Mary? I need to know what happened to Mary. And I thought, oh, no, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to write Mary's story, because Mary Browning isn't really her name. And so then you have to have her, and then something happens, so she's on the run again. So she had to go change her name again. So she's got a new name. So you've got the Mary Browning name, you have her new name, and then her real name, which is Sarah Rainsford. And she's on the run from her abusive husband, who's Lieutenant Kevin Hawkins. And he's going to do whatever it takes to get her and her inheritance back under his thumb. And so she ends up running out of money in Hollywood, and she gets a job as a personal assistant for this big director, this bad boy director, Meg Tilly. And so then, you know, it's like, okay, is she safe now? You know, she's safe in this moneyed enclave of Mulholland Hills, or is now Mick in the crosshairs of the danger that's threatening her? And yeah, he is. But don't worry, it all turns out okay. At least for the good guys, you know.
What I liked about The Runaway Heiress is you kind of illustrate, especially for women who are trying to get out of abusive situations, that if the male in the partnership is affiliated with law, order, or somehow has that background, it's very hard for the woman to get believed or get away. I mean, it's just a really difficult situation.
It is. It's really difficult because they have access to all types of things that the average person wouldn't. I mean, people have access to a lot more tools now with the internet and stuff like that, but they have, I mean, I read this one scary article about this woman who her husband had set it up as a smart house, and how he would, after they broke up, he's like, no, she didn't know how to do, and he would turn on the lights. He was like stalking her through the house. It was, you know, unlocking, having the alarms go off. It was, but that's not in this book at all. I don't know why my brain just went there. But yes, so it is. But I want to say that this isn't you know, manifesto against law enforcement, because there are many wonderful men and women who do put their lives on the line to keep us safe. And my husband's father was a police officer for 30 years or something at the New York Police Department. A wonderful man, a good, honorable man who worked very, very hard to, you know, keep people safe and also to provide for his family. So this guy just happens to be, and I do know of, I mean, I have a friend who's, you know, a judge, and I do know a lot of stories. I've heard a lot of stories about there's always a few bad apples in every profession, and this guy is, and he uses he might be very good at his job actually, but he uses his power and what he has access for to keep Sarah and her massive inheritance, you know, in his grasp. And it's scary, but it's supposed to be scary, right? Because
that's right.
Romantic suspense.
It's an edge of the seat kind of book. And I think what you also illustrate with the Runaway Heiress is how difficult it is today for people to disappear.
Yes.
40 years ago, you could reinvent yourself, go to a different part of the world. Yes. No one would ever know. But now with the internet, with digital resources, you can't hide.
I know. And also the film.
Yeah.
Like all the film that they have where they're filming everywhere.
The cameras and
yeah. And the things, like when I did research for all the things that they have access to, I was like, whoa, like you don't know really what you're going to, you know that he's looking her up. And then you're looking like, oh my gosh, you could do this. Oh, holy smokes. Now what, you know? So yeah, it's very, very hard. I mean, and it's kind of interesting because I don't know why I just thought of that, but when I first became famous, it's kind of, it's just a taste of what he does, is a taste of what I had, where I thought that my acting was such that people wouldn't recognize me, because I was very good all my life before I became famous at disappearing. So if I wanted to be present, I could hold your body in a certain way and wear a certain type of clothes. But if I wanted to disappear, I was really good at just blending into the shadows. And once you're famous, you can't. Now I can disappear a lot more. Age has given me that benefit, because, for women, you hit a certain age and it's much easier to disappear as well. And then it's sort of like, if somebody's nice to me, they're like, oh, she reminds me of my mom, or oh, my grandmother, or whatever. But you know what I mean? It's, if people want to talk to you, it's because they find you interesting. They look further than the skin. When I was younger, it was more skin and what my profession was. It was kind of tattooed on my forehead. And it's odd, because if you're in a restaurant and you're trying to have a private meal with your partner, but you can feel eyes on you and people coming up to the table, it's another way of not being. So for her, to disappear is very hard. I don't know why I got onto that tangent. It doesn't really have, but I'm like, oh, huh.
Now, The Runaway Heiress is set in Hollywood for a good portion of the book, so it was kind of a return to a familiar setting for you.
Yes.
Did you find yourself maybe borrowing or reinventing some of your own personal experiences in Hollywood? Talk about the setting.
Yeah. So yes. So I borrowed, I'm not going to say the actual person, but when I had the kicking off place, it was a certain actor who had this kind of like just energy, a younger version of. I borrowed a little bit perhaps of the past as the kicking off place, but that guy was way more like, like wah, and whereas this guy has the appearances of that and the trappings of that. But I could see. So here's the thing. So this person, had a real bad boy kind of, yeah, but kind of Dennis the Menace type thing. But he came from a background of challenge. I think that's where we connected. But I could see, so he's like brash and this and got the world by the balls, but I could see these flashes of vulnerability on this particular film I was on, when friends were not behaving like friends. And I could just see the little boy, like, but because he finally made these, you know what I mean? And also being in Hollywood, like so many people, because of what I did and because of what my previous husband did, you see people at the top of their game. And you not only see them at the top of their game, and massively talented, massively successful people, you also see the fear in their eyes. Like I remember there was this one screening I went to, we went out to dinner afterwards and everybody was sure it was an absolute bomb. And they were, reading the funeral rites over it. And I just said, excuse me, they were huge, huge, huge. I said, I don't think you guys were I think you're too close to it. I don't think you were in the same screening room that I was. The audience loved it. It was a great film. It's going to be a big hit. And they all looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And then they started talking, and then they got a phone call and they had gotten the cards back from what the audience's response was, and they loved it. And it was going to be, and it went on to be a huge hit. But I think there's always that. I think what draws people to Hollywood is generally, like Mick, reinventing his world, being in a world where he has control over things, because in his childhood and in the world he grew up in, it was all about illusion, because he grew up in a brothel. But it was all about, so he lived a lot in his mind, and he would, go out to his place on the, so it's all about reinventing yourself, but always feeling like, but if they really knew who I was, or it's only a matter of time before, the emperor has no clothes. Or I had that feeling lots of times, everybody's thinking I was such a fancy actress, but where I came from, we didn't wear shoes in the summer because you don't waste them. You don't wear out the soles. You know what I mean? Like, just and I always felt like if people knew about my childhood, they would run screaming, and everybody's like, oh, and there I was playing Sister Agnes, and yet there was this darkness in my past that I hadn't acknowledged. That's why I wrote my first book, really, to acknowledge it. I didn't know it was going to be a book. I just wrote down memories.
Well, I think that shows in a lot of your characters because they do have these nuances. They're not all just the surface. There's things going on below that the readers see, like the hero in The Runaway Heiress. Do you find, having worked as an actress, that you're bringing some of those skills to your writing? Like, do you have an ear for dialogue? Do you find yourself directing characters? Talk about that.
Yes, and sometimes my characters are like actors and they misbehave and they don't follow what I want them to do. And they're like, oh no, that doesn't, because I'm lucky because, all those years of doing sensory class or doing, so I know how the sensations of, because you have to replicate it in yourself for your characters. So of where it sits in the body, right? Or doing dialogue and hearing it on your tongue and knowing if it feels right or if it feels false, or how people sometimes say one thing but they're feeling another. So that I remember my acting teacher, Peggy Fury, she was remarkable. She's like another Jane Ann Krentz, but she was really remarkable. And she said, Meg, what you want to do, she said, is you don't allow us to see everything that's going on. She said, just once in a while, every once in a while, the curtain blows aside for a moment and you see it, and then it's back in place. And I don't know why I just thought of that, but that's like what you try to, because in the beginning you're like, oh, they're feeling this or this, but it's like somebody will say something. Many times in life they can say something that hurts your feelings or that makes you scared but it's how you respond that. So it's really fun. I really like it because I get to write both sides of it, and I get to do the whole circle, and it's like The Runaway Heiress. It was like puzzle pieces. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. I mean, not just with him, but with Sarah as well. And I think it's like two people who the world sees differently. Like people will read about like people who have massive amounts of money, like heiresses, and think they have this charmed life. And it was for her for a period of life, but look at all the challenges that it brought to her, and that she was always seen as the heiress, and people, you couldn't tell. Like, I think sometimes people who aren't in those heightened circumstances don't realize what a luxury they have to be able to walk in the world and have people respond to them, not because of their preconceived ideas, but just as
A person,
right? Because I remember when we were shooting War Machine with Brad Pitt, and we were shooting a section in it was in Berlin or Belgium, no, Berlin, and it was at a roadside thing with a gas station, and there was stores, and he was walking around and looking at the stuff on the shop, on this things, and he's like, yeah, haven't been in a store since I think Thelma and Louise. Like, you know what I mean? You just couldn't. And there's an isolation to having great success or great, and I think a lot of times people don't realize it. And I think a lot of times people might think twice about going into areas where they have it, because it's that kind of needing to express oneself or be vulnerable or show, needing to speak the truth, because usually they come from damage, and then all of a sudden all eyes are on them, and they don't have that safety of, instead of watching people, because a lot of times artists, whether it's writers, are people watchers, but if you're in the public eye, you can't watch because everybody's watching you.
Yeah, I know a lot of writers have said that, like when they're out having coffee or lunch, or they're eavesdropping on other conversations because that's ideas for them. That's how they are inspired and things like that. But you can't really do that if you're famous because you're the focus.
Yeah, but luckily, if you, like, I stepped away and got older, and so I mean, there's a little bit like, you know, people come up, but now it's much more like, I'm just another person tootling down the road. You know, there still is some, but it's so much better. And I'm older too, so now it's not like danger at every corner, because, you know, the kind of fans you have when you're older are very different than the kind of fans you have when you're younger.
It's true. You mentioned your writing process and acting and writing, and I found a quote somewhere that from you that you said you like the freedom of writing because you don't need permission from anyone to be creative. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So John, like with acting, you work really hard, and you you uh you have to go, and you go and you meet, and you might read for a part, and then read again, and then they have you read with the actor they've cast. And it used to break my heart when I'd work really, really hard on a character, and then they'd go a different way. Like I'd feel like, but, or somebody would tell me that they were going to go with me, and I'd turn down other films, and then, you know, last minute they decide to go with somebody else. And then you have this person that you've spent time to do your to get the part, diving into their skin and getting closer, and you never get to like fully inhabit them. So it's sort of like you fall in love with them a bit, the character, and you want to be like, here they are. Whereas writing, you don't have to have permission. I can write what, I mean, I have cupboard, I'm in my right, I have cupboards and cupboards full of duotangs and manuscripts that I've written that I've never sent out, and I never will. It was all part of my process of writing personal story, to work through things, or writing. um, but in writing, you write something, and even if, okay, so I've been blessed that like traditional publishers, it's like 10 books, and like, whoa, I know like Jane has what, 50 million books, and you know, Nora Roberts has zillions of books, and you know, all of, but for me, like I've written 10, I've had 10 by, it's like, whoa. But for you authors out there who maybe the doorway, there's less people doing the traditional publishing. I mean, there are, but they're bigger, there are less places to go. You can still do it. You can still independently publish, and there's not really that stigma there now that there was. You can do it, and you can do it with Ingram and whatever, and it can be in bookstores. And so it's a little bit harder. I prefer doing traditional, but if I couldn't, if I write something and I love it, and they're like, oh yeah, it's not for us, I could do that. So it's not like it's you doing all this and it goes out there. Although as acting, I had to learn that I got to say hello to somebody for a short period of time, and not to be devastated if I didn't get it, because I got a chance to slip inside that person's skin. And every time you do, either as a writer or actress, or as just a person, like you, John, you're a very empathetic person. So every time you notice something about somebody else, or you see something, and for a moment you slip inside their skin and their experience as to, oh wow, that must have been really hard. I think it expands us as a person, right?
Mhm.
Even when you meet people who it's a maybe a challenging interaction, it's all part of what, how we respond to it is how we grow. Or when I was in a character, either writing or enacting, that took choices that led him down a wrong path, it's my way to experience that and be like, yeah, that's not for me. You know what I mean? To be able to hold, in romantic suspense, you can hold the light and the dark in both hands. Um,
I know a lot of readers are fascinated by authors' writing processes, and they range over the map depending on the author. What is your own approach when you start a book? Do you have a specific regime? Does it vary? Do you know exactly what you're going to do? Do you just sit down and wait for inspiration?
well, I can't, I write. So that and out of that sometimes comes something. So I'll bang around with things in my head. If I have like, so I knew they wanted me to do Mary, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go, but I don't know if I can, who became Sarah in The Runaway Heiress. I don't know if I can. But then I just sit with it. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, I can her, but I got to find the right guy. And I try on sometimes, like in Cliff's Edge, I tried 3 different guys until I finally found. So with this one, 2 different ones. So the first one I tried, he was an automobile parts distributor. And again, I didn't take that long to figure out that it just wasn't gonna work. I did all this research on it, like, okay, and what do you do? And what, and then when I found Mick and he started talking to me, then I knew I had a book. I didn't know if it would be romantic suspense, because he started off like, whoa, but I sent the first 60 pages to my agent, and she gave me really great notes and said, no, keep going. So I did. So my process is, it's like once the characters, like the 2 main ones just start coming to life, then I know I'm onto something. And then all the other characters kind of just start, and I find it's like puzzle pieces, but I don't know. I can have an idea where I'm going, but many times I end up somewhere entirely different. I wish I was the other way sometimes. It seems like I have to write and rewrite, and I throw out so much, so much, and then I go again, and then so maybe a lot of people, writers who are more like, this is how I do it, and they write out, I've seen some authors, they have the whole thing out and then they just do it, they just go from one to one to one, but I can't. I've even done that on the manuscript I'm working on now. It's like I think it's a trilogy. I wrote out maybe 45, 50 pages and added to it of stuff. It just doesn't work that way. It's like, once I get the characters true, then if I'm trying to put something on them and they're like, it feels false. Yeah. So that's my process. I sit down, I write probably 7 days a week, but I give myself the out that it's 5 days a week, because if a family member needs me, or if somebody's visiting, then I will step back. And if actually I have somebody come for a week, I'll go to it and just do like 2 hours a day, just so I don't lose the songs in my head, because they're like, voices are like, so I keep the rhythm, but I don't do like serious, like, 4, 5, 6 hours when people are here.
Not only are you a terrific writer, what I love about you is you're also a big reader. Can you share some of the things that you've enjoyed and what might be on your summer reading list this year?
Okay. So I just, so as I said, I've read Jane's.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and on my reading to be read is her Guild Boss, which is her next one, and then she's got another one coming out in January. Oh, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Jane Ann Krentz ones.
It's the Last in the Fog trilogy.
Oh yeah, the Last in the Fog trilogy. So of course I'm always on tenterhooks for Jane's books, just because she's like my comfort food. I just read Susan Elizabeth Phillips, When Stars Collide.
Yes.
Now this one surprised me, because I've she's everybody else has adored her for years, but I just discovered her through Jane. We did a Zoom thing and I met her, so I started reading her books, and they're so good. And the funny thing is I had not read her books, because I was like, oh, she's a friend of Jane Ann Krentz, I'm gonna check her out. But then they were always about sports, and I'm not a sporty girl. Right. And so I'm like, well, football, that's not gonna be, or golfing, not for me. But I'm telling you, because her characters are so good and her dialogue's so good, and she really just, they feel real. You just have fun. So this is like a football player and an opera singer. Yeah. But the thing is, I haven't seen her do. She's got a bit of romantic suspense through here, and I was like, but it's not like my kind of suspense. It's a different kind of suspense. It's more like it's a cozy suspense. Do you know what I mean? I mean, not cozy because there's bad guys, but it's not. It's I read. It's not, yeah. It's not what you're gonna say.
There is a thread of suspense. Yeah, it's not quite. It's more of a minor chord story rather than in your book. It's a major chord.
That's right, but it's a great chord. It's good, and it keeps me turning the pages. Now this one, all my readers know, because I've been talking about this for a while, Lizzie and Dante. And I think when I was at the Poison Pen like a couple years ago,
Yeah.
I told you that there was a manuscript that I'd read, and then it was called Elba, but they changed the title to Lizzie and Dante. And it was so fun to reread this book because there's been changes to the manuscript, and I love the manuscript, and it just was so beautiful. You'll love it. There's a great love story in it, but it's about life. And I have to admit, I did cry a couple of times, but in a good way. It was like embracing life. I also read, if you're into like more mature romances, Mariah Stewart's Invincible Summer. I just finished that just recently. That's really good, and it's women who's, I was gonna say around my age, but they're, I think 55. She's 55, and I'm not. I'm older. So I read that, and that was really nice. So if you're looking for mature, I read. Do you know Mimi Matthews?
Does she write mysteries?
She writes historical. So she just wrote she just has a new Gothic thing out. I haven't read that, but I found one of her books. I got it because I liked the cover. It was very Christmassy, and I got it. And then I just read all her other ones. So she was a new to me author, when the pandemic started, and now I've read all of her things. I read an arc of The Siren of Sussex. She writes historical romance.
I've seen the advanced publicity for it. It's coming out, I believe. It's not out yet, is it?
No, it's not out yet. I don't know when it's coming out, but I read an arc. It's really good. What I love about her is she does, like, I love all different types of historical. Like I love her Amanda Quick ones, and I've just started, but hers has like very specific historical detail. I think her legal background kind of gives her that sort of research thing. And this is, it's really good. And she deals with it, but she also deals with a bit of weightier issues, like how it was really for women in those times and what they needed. So I enjoyed that. And then on the non-romance suspense side, I did a podcast with the history of literature, and the guy who does it, his name's Jack Wilson, but it has an E on the end, the Jack, and I enjoyed talking with him, and I got both his novellas, and I just finished last night the one called The Race. So this is for more people who are more into literary. It's a novella, very inexpensive, but it's really, I would have paid way more. It's about a governor who had a sex scandal, and it feels true. Like he's writing with a pseudonym, and I think there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
It feels like it's these quiet observations, and so it's written from the point of view of the biographer, and it's just the spiral of this man who just keeps going forward. There's images that stick with me. So that's a really beautiful novella that I recommend, that I just finished last night.
I love that you brought up Eloisa James' Mary Bly book, because I remember you talking about that, Lizzie and Dante. And you're right, it's a very emotional book. And I know there are some readers that look at it and think, do I really want to read a book that's going to make me cry, especially now when there's so much that you do, because you also laugh and you also come to appreciate what life is. So for anyone out there that might be hesitant, and I know I was thinking, yes, you are going to cry, so just prepare yourself for that, but you're going to laugh, and it's just a beautifully written book. It's so evocative of that place in Italy and the food and the people. So all of what you've suggested are fabulous. I'm going to have to look for The Siren of Sussex now, because I've seen it mentioned.
Yes, it does. It does make you, it makes you cry, but not in a bad way.
No.
It makes you cry because it's a tenderness of life. There's a tenderness to it, and there's a sweetness to it. And I think the thing is that it's not a downer. What it does is make you say, I'm going to taste my food, and I'm not going to, none of us know how long we have here.
No.
None of us do. But so when you are, it's like we've all been in this kind of scary situation with the pandemic and everything. So do we then say, okay, I'm going to shut off life and I'm not going to, or do we just say, okay, well, I'm here right now. Like that's what my husband and I had to keep saying when because we've been in lockdown. What was it, 17 months or something like that? I don't know, like a long time. We went lockdown right away. And here in Canada, we just got our second shot. So it's sort of like, there's times when you're like, and then you're like, no, be in our body right now. And I'm holding your hand. And it feels warm in mine. And we're here. And you know, and to not spiral on these others, but to allow ourselves to be like, yes, there's challenges in all our lives. There's challenges that are going to come up against us every day. And we can either grab onto them and ride them to the end and spend so much of our life doing that, or we can say, and then we go like, oh, wait, but right now I'm right here. And right now, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's what, but it gave me that feeling of, and the food, because Dante's a chef.
Yeah.
You know, just the descriptions, it just made me hungry and like, oh, I want that. And it's armchair traveling as well. It's an uplifting read. It's beautiful. Eloisa James fans, you should read it because it's really a beautiful book. If you like her other books, you're gonna love this because it's got all of that 4 years it took her to write. So it's got layers upon layers and the skill and the love in there. I mean, it's a real love letter to her readers. I think everybody should read it.
It's wonderful. Now let's make a segue, because in addition to writing and reading, you've also become something of a internet social sensation with your daily tea time chats. Can you tell those of us who don't know about that, what those are, how it evolved?
Well, what happened is, again, the pandemic. So my husband, you know, he's a little bit more like, because so he decided, I'm going to do something. I'm going to learn how to play the guitar. So he went online and he found all these YouTube channels where people would teach how to play guitar. And so he loved them, and it gave him something to do, and he got a guitar. Now he's got a couple guitars, but he's gotten really good. But we had been in, let's see, it was March, April, May, June, July, 5 months. We'd been in lockdown for 5 months. When we first went in, we thought it was going to be for 2 or 3 months, you know, but it was, and he had before that around 3 months, and he's like, honey, you should have a YouTube channel. I'm like, oh no, thanks honey, but no thanks. So, but he kept on kind of bringing it up. And I had this one day where I had a really good day writing, where I felt invincible. I'd gotten 4 pages, which I never get. It's like 3 pages. That's really good. Only once in my life, I got 7 pages in one day. And then I was shaking. I was like, because I was like, so I just felt invincible, and we were exercising, and he goes, again, he brought it up again. Like he says, no, but I really think you should. And I think, and I wasn't going to, but it was a period of time where it felt like the world was just falling down around us. And I just thought, well, if it'll keep him happy, you know, it's just the 2 of us. And I thought it might be like a little, and I thought nobody would go see it, or, you know, and I just, because he'd said, when I said, honey, I don't want to have to put on makeup, because I did put a little makeup on to talk with you. You know, I don't want to have to put on, like, you know, find an outfit or something, you know, because you do have to kind of, he goes, no, you don't have to. People on YouTube don't. And he pulled up a video or 2, and it was like a scruffy magician. He's in his garage, and he was like playing, and his hair's like this, and he's kind of blurry-eyed and drinking a beer. And he's like, and I'm like, oh, okay. And he's just wearing an old saggy t-shirt. And then he's another musician in there. And so I'm like, oh, well, okay, I'll if I don't have to do makeup, if I don't have to brush my hair, if I don't have to, then sure, let's do something. You could figure out how to put it up, just as a way to keep him entertained. I didn't think anybody, and then he's like, so I taped something. I marched upstairs. I was sweaty from exercising, and I had a shirt with holes on it, and my hair was like, you know, a bit sweaty. And he's like, this is great. And he put it up. And so I said, okay, well, I'll do it for a month, just to give him, and then a month. And I'll do it for 2 months. Okay. And then more and more people showed up, and I don't know that I'm a YouTube sensation, but we sure have a cozy brand of tea timers. And then Murchie's Tea, somebody from Murchie's Tea, they designed a box of tea. Somewhere. Well, anyway, a collection of Meg's Cozy Tea Time collections. So you can order it from Murchie's, because my tea timers, they're like, where do you get your tea? We want to drink. So then they all went out and they bought the tea. So they sip the tea while I'm doing, so like, oh, what's Meg having? So like today I'm having Darjeeling, but I'm not, it's not like a tie-in with Murchie's. It's just, I love their tea and I've drunk it all my life. I don't get any.
They're a great company. They're
Oh,
Canadian, aren't they?
you know of them?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can get Meg's Cozy Tea Time. And if you put the code Meg, like capital MEG, then you'll get 5% off. So if you're a Cozy Tea, I mean, if you're and it's on any of their teas or stuff, but I don't get any kickback. I just drink the tea. I've drunk it. It was like when I didn't drink it when I was little because it was fancy, you know, we couldn't afford it. But, you know, the minute I got some money, I've been Murchie's for years.
It's kind of like the equivalent of what Nora Roberts does with Diet Coke in her books. You always see her writing about Diet Coke. You're writing about tea.
Right. Yes. Nora Roberts was another one that when I started off reading, I read all of Nora Roberts, all of Jane's books. And then at first it was Amanda Quick. And then it was like, oh, she's also Jane Ann Prince. And then when she came out with the Jane Castle, I was like, oh, I don't know about that. But then I read it, I'm like, these are good too. So they were my first two. They were my gateway drugs.
Before we have to end, I do want to ask, you mentioned that you're working on another book, so we can look forward to something possibly.
Well, we don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I finished. Yes, I've done the first draft. Then I've done a polish. My husband went through a note, so I'm going through with his notes, and then I'm going to be sending it to my agent. But this one's different. This one's, I didn't know what it was, and Jane had sent me a email because every once in a while she emails me. No, sorry. It's hard to believe just because I've read her for so many years.
Yeah.
She said, how are you going? How's the writing? And I thought, well, I should probably just say, oh, fine. But I was really thinking, it didn't become, I started out saying I'm going to write a rom-com, and it refused to, because it refused to be a rom-com. Not only did it refuse to be a rom-com, but it shifted to a weirder, darker place than my romantic suspense. And I was trying to shape it into, but it wasn't. And so I said, I'm having difficulty with it, and I don't know. I'm almost at the end of the first draft, but I don't know if I should just put it aside and just try to start something new. And she goes, let's Zoom. And so we Zoomed the next morning, and she said, okay, tell me it. And I was really scared because, you know, when you really look up to somebody, you don't want to be like, oh yeah, here's my mess all over this is messy. So I said, okay, but because I felt like a little sweaty and my heart's pounding and my face is red, but I tell her the story and I tell her what happened. She goes, oh, that sounds cool. No, that's the kind of book I like to read. And then she said, no, you definitely finish it and send it. She said, because I was had maybe 3 or 4 more days left. And she said, it's, what'd she say? It's gothic horror suspense.
Ooh, that's on trend right now.
Oh yeah, that's what she said. And she said, no, don't, she said. And so then I was like, oh, it's a genre. I was really embarrassed that I'd written the thing, but I think that the pandemic and everything, or just like being, and also family stuff was coming up, and other things were coming up, and I'm like, no, you know, where you have certain things happen, and it just came out, things that my mom, well, it's complicated. I won't go into the whole story, but you know, it was
what's going on in your personal life can affect your writing life too.
Right, because family was processing things, and so my mom and things like that were very present, and so yeah, so there's like a kind of supernatural kind of thing, which I thought it was going to be my answer to, you know, I don't believe in this, to
Well, always do what Jane says. That's been my motto in life. And I'm thrilled that you are working on something, and we may have the possibility of another book. Before I forget, I do want to mention again, we do have Meg's new book, The Runaway Heiress. And Meg very graciously sent us some signed, you probably won't see it that well, but book plates We have a limited number. So if you're interested in getting a book plate with your copy of The Runaway Heiress, you need to order it from the Poison Pen ASAP. Give us a call, go online. We'd be glad to send that out. And I'll make one last plug. Meg mentioned Jane's Castle book coming in November, The Guild Boss. It is terrific. We do have it on order. Feel free to reserve it. All I'll tell you is it involves pizza eating dust bunnies. That's all you need to know about Jane's book. And I want to thank you, Meg. You've been just a delight. I can't believe how fast the time has flown by. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing such terrific books. And thank all of you for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Huh.
Now, just in case I lose you, because I'm the worst with technology, as I start closing things out, I do really want to thank you, Meg. You've been just absolutely wonderful. You're a delight to interview. I hope we can ask you to come back again, whether it's virtually or in person.
Sure, I'd love to.
That would be great.
And this time I'm going to make sure, if I get to come in person, that while everybody's, I'm going to run out and grab one of your lemon things that everybody talks about.
Well, I wish I could send them to you.
I know, across the border is too difficult.
Yeah. I'll send you do you bake?
I do. Actually,
I'll send you the recipe.
Okay, because I was, ever since, I was like, oh, and I got a lemon cookie recipe that I started making with the lemon glaze, just because I'm like, and I was pretending it was your lemon bars, because everybody waxes lyric, but I would love your lemon bar recipe. I won't give it to anybody if you.
Oh, it's from a regular cookbook.
Oh, great,
so
great. Perfect.
And what's great about it is it's pretty much foolproof. So
yeah, even nicer.
That will be definitely something I'll send out to you. And thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and try closing stuff out. If I don't see you, please stay safe and stay well. And it was just a delight to see you, Meg.
Lovely to see you. Thank you.